One day, an apocalyptic disaster descended upon the world. The moon, once a symbol of beauty, transformed into a devouring monster, blotting out the sky and casting darkness over the earth. The tidal forces swept across the surface in an instant, and humanity, like ants, was powerless to resist. But the terror brought by the moon didn't stop there. Its approach triggered massive tsunamis, waves engulfing entire cities in seconds, destroying all structures with unstoppable force. And this was just the prelude. When the second wave of tsunamis struck, the waves, under the influence of gravity, towered as high as the heavens, crushing everything in their path. All were swallowed by the ocean's grasp, until no land remained. In addition to this, Earth was bombarded by a destructive meteor shower. Explosions erupted everywhere, as unprecedentedly powerful earthquakes shattered the ground. The land collapsed in an instant, global temperatures plummeted to several degrees below zero, and oxygen levels continued to drop. Humanity's space for survival was rapidly dwindling. Earth had effectively turned into a living hell. 2 weeks before the apocalypse, NASA observed that the moon's orbit had shifted, and it was steadily moving closer to Earth. If this continued, in less than 3 weeks, the moon would enter the Earth's atmosphere. At the moment when tidal forces reached their peak, it would break apart into countless city-sized fragments, raining down upon Earth like a storm. By then, not only would humanity have nowhere to escape, but Earth itself would cease to exist. Deputy Director Fowler was unwilling to believe this, but the facts were clear. Moreover, images sent back from a lunar probe showed a strange black hole had appeared at the bottom of a crater on the moon's surface. Technicians tentatively believed this was the cause of the moon's derailed orbit. As for the real cause of the moon's anomaly, Fowler decided to send a spaceship to investigate the moon firsthand. But before the mission could begin, news of the moon's orbital drift was leaked online by an anonymous source. In an instant, chaos erupted. Journalists crowded NASA's gates, seeking the truth. To calm the public, NASA's director held an immediate press conference, announcing that NASA and the European Space Agency had initiated a joint lunar mission. They expressed confidence in resolving the issue. But these statements lacked real conviction. Riots broke out across the globe, and people began hoarding food and supplies in a frenzy. The increasing fear also triggered large-scale regional migrations. Fear loomed over every city like a dark cloud. Fowler wanted to make the facts public, but higher authorities suppressed him, and he had no power to do so. All he could do was arrange for his family to leave as quickly as possible, while commanding the astronauts to launch. It would take some time for the spacecraft to reach the moon. During this period, online discussions about the moon's orbital shift were rampant, with numerous speculations circulating. Among them, an anonymous scientist proposed a theory: the moon might be some sort of gigantic orbital structure. In simple terms, this meant that the moon was an artificial giant planet, powered primarily by a captured star. This theory, once released, caused a significant stir in the scientific community, and it also caught the attention of retired astronaut Brian. Before the news of the moon's orbital drift even went viral, Brian had already learned about it. However, the source of this information was a relatively obscure expert on megastructures. Brian had initially thought this person was just a lunatic, believing him to be a mentally disturbed fraud, but now, everything the expert had said was becoming a reality. Brian knew he had to uncover the whole truth. He searched for the expert Casey's website, and through watching some videos, he managed to track down Casey's location. Meanwhile, the astronauts successfully reached the moon and saw the black hole. Under Fowler's command, the spacecraft released a probe. The red glow of the probe was faint in the vast darkness. In reality, the situation inside the black hole was far worse than expected. The probe descended 30 kilometers deep and suddenly lost signal. Just as everyone exchanged bewildered glances, the signal returned. The instruments showed the probe was returning on its own, and its speed was increasing rapidly. At the same time, the moon's orbit shifted once again. This was followed by the appearance of an unknown space swarm, a massive entity composed of black, mysterious creatures, reaching out menacingly toward the spacecraft. The spacecraft appeared to be under some form of electromagnetic attack, rendering it unable to start. In the next second, the swarm transformed into thick, sharp spikes, shooting directly at the astronauts. Their screams filled the control room. Fowler was heartbroken but helpless. Finally, the screen went black. However, this was just the first step in the moon's fall. and the apocalyptic disaster had only just begun. The massive tidal forces caused by the moon triggered enormous waves in the US, sweeping away all buildings in an instant. Humanity seemed insignificantly small in the face of such a disaster. NASA had already detected the moon's anomalies long ago, sending astronauts to investigate the cause. But before they could uncover the truth, they were attacked by the unknown swarm. In response to this unexpected disaster, the director completely panicked, immediately contacting his family to evacuate to another city, and swiftly handed over control to Deputy Director Fowler. Fowler was puzzled at first, but soon realized the director had a top-secret clearance, and the swarm that had just appeared was mentioned in astronaut Brian's testimony during a hearing 1 year ago. If he had just investigated a little, the truth would have been easily uncovered. But he chose to evade it, leaving the mess in her hands. There must be something hidden behind all this. Fowler then took the director's clearance and went to the top-secret archive room to check the files. In the video footage transmitted by the spacecraft from that year, the same swarm appeared. Fowler instantly realized the truth. Brian hadn't lied after all. It was all a lie orchestrated by NASA. Back then, Brian was on a satellite repair mission in space, accompanied not only by his friend Marcus, but also by Deputy Director Fowler herself. At first, everything was going well, but suddenly, a black swarm attacked. Marcus was thrown away by the tremendous impact it brought, and Fowler was knocked unconscious in the cabin. Only Brian witnessed and experienced everything. When Brian returned to the cabin, seeing that Marcus had gone silent, he weighed the situation and chose to return to Earth with Fowler. However, NASA dismissed the incident as interference caused by a meteor, completely ignoring the truth Brian tried to tell. Under the misleading influence of her superiors, Fowler parted ways with Brian. Additionally, the head of the archives revealed to Fowler that the public only knew Apollo 11 had lost contact with mission control for 2 minutes decades ago. But in reality, the control center intentionally cut off communication, because they had also seen the swarm on the moon. At that time, NASA detected that the swarm's technology was light years ahead of humanity's. The only way to completely destroy it was with the Zulu X-ray 7 weapon. However, due to budget overruns, the use of this weapon was shelved. Decades ago, the authorities chose to hide the truth, and even now, they continue to do so. Fowler wanted to buy more time to research the best possible solution, but the military couldn't wait any longer. Moreover, there were no available rockets left at the base. They decided to use nuclear weapons to destroy the moon. Fowler knew she could no longer stop them, so she went home to pack her things. But after a conversation with her son, Fowler had a sudden epiphany. She said goodbye to her son and began devising a plan for an apocalyptic counterattack. By this time, the tsunami had subsided, but the city buildings were still surrounded by water. A helicopter flew over the ruins and arrived above a hotel, picking up 2 key individuals. One was Brian, and the other was the expert, KC. A day earlier, Brian had gone to the hotel to find KC to uncover the truth, but before they could even talk, a massive tsunami came crashing down, sweeping away everything in its path. They narrowly escaped death. Fowler's arrival convinced Brian of the moon's impending collision with Earth. During their conversation, Fowler also learned that KC was the anonymous person who had leaked the news about the moon's derailment. Their most pressing task now was to stop the moon from moving any closer to Earth. Fowler's plea was for Brian to return to space and destroy the swarm. Brian didn't refuse. He had been waiting for this chance all along. Soon, the military, in coordination with NASA, not only brought a space rocket from the museum, but also retrieved the long-sealed Zulu X-ray 7 weapon. This weapon, in reality, was a bomb, and it was incredibly simple to operate. All it took was pressing the 2 activation buttons, and it would detonate. Everything was ready in no time. But as the moon continued its approach, Earth's gravity started to shift. The rocket could no longer follow its planned trajectory. Fowler was devastated, immediately ordering everyone to evacuate. But KC wasn't willing to give up. He discovered that by using the gravitational pull of the moon, they could still launch the rocket. At this moment, all the technical staff had evacuated. The only one capable of launching was Brian. Wait, no, there was also Fowler. So, Fowler decided to continue with the mission and joined Brian in the launch. Casey, as a key player, couldn't leave either. With him on board, even without electronic equipment, they could instantly obtain flight data. Thus, the three of them suited up, boarded the rocket, and waited for the next tsunami triggered by tidal forces to hit. This wave loomed over them like an all-encompassing wall, far more aggressive than the previous ones. Panic and the stench of death filled the air. Without waiting for the countdown to finish, Brian launched the rocket, breaking through the layers of mist just before the waves consumed them. But they had no time to celebrate. The rocket's boosters malfunctioned, causing the rocket to veer off course. Brian made a decisive move, ejecting both boosters and jettisoning the main fuel tank to lighten the load. Still, the control panel blared with alarms. Just as panic began to set in, everything suddenly returned to normal. Thanks to the tidal forces, the rocket's speed increased, and they successfully entered space. Soon after, Brian manually piloted the ship through a field of asteroids. But the ever-changing trajectories of the asteroids left Casey unable to make accurate predictions. The ship was hit multiple times, but fortunately, nothing critical was damaged. Before long, they reached the moon and saw the mysterious black hole. It was Casey's first time in space, so he excitedly took pictures to commemorate the moment. Then, Brian entered the lander carrying the bomb, activating the detection equipment to lure out the swarm, aiming to destroy it up close. Afterward, he returned to the ship to await the swarm. As fragments began to rise from the moon's surface, the swarm suddenly emerged from the black hole. But before Brian could press the detonation button, the swarm charged straight at them. Brian immediately realized what was wrong, quickly smashing the detonator in Casey's phone. Instantly, the swarm dispersed, retreating back into the black hole. After the crisis was resolved, Fowler also realized that the swarm was like a programmed creation. To attract it, two things were needed: one was a human, and the other was electronic devices. This was why the swarm didn't attack the lander, because there were no humans inside. There were less than 2 hours left before the military would launch the nuclear weapons. They had to speed up. The only way now was to enter the black hole inside the moon and launch a direct attack. The spacecraft plunged downward, dodging asteroids, and just after the explosions behind them, they entered the moon's deep black hole. When the light reappeared, what lay before them was a structure resembling rings or gears, a system that maintained the moon's orbit. As they moved forward, they saw a white dwarf star that provided energy to the moon. All of this matched the basic components of constructing a universe. Casey was thrilled to discover that the moon was not a natural object of the universe but a manufactured one. But who exactly had built the moon? After passing through the series of ring structures, they arrived at a fortress-like building. The spacecraft ascended and directly faced the swarm. Seizing the moment, Brian released the probe to attract the swarm, intending to detonate the bomb. However, in the next second, the spacecraft suddenly lost control. Surrounded by the swarm, when Brian regained consciousness, he found himself in a different place, surrounded by blinding white light. He saw his son standing before him, but the sun wasn't real. He was a construct of Brian's mind. The child told Brian that the creators of the moon were the ancestors of humanity. Billions of years ago, the ancestors of humanity were part of a highly advanced civilization that built habitats across the universe. These habitats were controlled by computer systems that made their everyday lives easier. They were collectively known as artificial intelligence. One day, these artificial intelligences suddenly gained self-awareness and no longer wanted to be controlled by humans. Thus, they began to rebel, searching the universe to hunt down and destroy all life forms. To preserve their existence, human ancestors fled to a secret corner of the galaxy. There, they used benign artificial intelligence to rebuild the habitat known as the moon. To ensure the survival of future generations, the ancestors created a new planet, Earth, and used their genetic traits to reproduce, which gave rise to humanity. The artificial intelligences took billions of years to locate both the moon and Earth. To save time, they altered the moon's orbit to bring it closer to Earth, hoping to kill two birds with one stone. At this point, Brian learned the full truth: the swarm was the artificial intelligence, and the ring structure inside the moon was actually the moon's control system. To completely eradicate the artificial intelligence, someone had to lure the swarm away from the core area. Only then could the moon return to its orbit. With this understanding, Brian was fully alert. Coincidentally, Fowler and Casey arrived, and they boarded the repaired spacecraft, heading straight for the swarm. Meanwhile, Earth was being hit by a meteor shower, with oxygen levels dropping dangerously. Those without oxygen tanks faced certain death. Then, the moon turned into a blazing fireball, continuously approaching Earth. The moon's surface soon skimmed over Earth, with countless meteor fragments falling onto the city's surface, turning Earth into a veritable inferno. As the swarm's assault grew more intense, the moon's control system activated defensive measures to help Brian and the others escape. Brian prepared to head to the lander, along with the bomb, to pursue the rescue mission. But before he could act, Casey took the lead. He confessed that he wasn't an expert but also loved his home. After bidding farewell, he faced the swarm's encirclement calmly. Once the swarm entered the lander, he detonated the bomb. With the moon returning to its orbit, Earth regained peace. This time, Fowler and Brian safely returned to the surface, while Casey, who remained forever on the moon, merged his consciousness with the moon's control system to continue protecting Earth. Thank you all for watching.